Hello and welcome to another Melta podcast. With me today is a beautiful friend and teacher, Ilá Coimbra. She comes from Brazil and she lives with us in Munich. So, as always, with all of our guests, we start with a very simple question. Ilá, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me, and I'm flattered to be here in this podcast. Thank you, and thanks for the beautiful.
You are.
Thank you. We
Okay.
all are.
Okay, so can you just tell us about yourself, your background, without getting too deep into work and teaching? Just about yourself.
It's difficult because most of myself is teaching. I think I've always been a teacher and I always wanted to be a teacher, so I'm gonna try not to get in there. But basically, I was born and raised in Brazil, in São Paulo. I'm half Italian as well. So my mom is Italian, my dad is Brazilian, and I was brought up in São Paulo, but in an Italian house. So I'm a little bit Brazilian, a little bit Italian, more Brazilian than Italian, I would say. And I think growing up in São Paulo defined me a lot because it's a huge city, 12 million people, 13 million people now. And I think I'm a very big city person. So I'm very urban. And so I like, for example, hiking and doing nature stuff, but I'm at my best when I'm in a big city with chaos, pollution, and noise. I think that defined me a lot as a person growing up in São Paulo. And apart from that, I don't know what else I can say about me. I'm very passionate about music, really like music. I really like arts, especially literature.
What kind of music?
Well, Brazilian music for sure, in general. And I like the music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, like rock, progressive rock, punk rock, dark wave, all those movements in the end of the 70s and
Rammstein. You
80s.
like Rammstein?
I used to like Rammstein. I don't listen to them anymore because it's a deal breaker to have the type of problems that they have, the scandals that they were involved in. This is a deal breaker for me, so I don't listen to them anymore.
Okay, I can check online about these problems because
It's fine.
yeah, it's fine. Okay, don't worry. You look nervous. Relax.
Okay.
It's the beginning. The beginning is always the most difficult.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Speaking about city life, well, today for the first time we are recording outside.
It's
Well,
beautiful.
it is in a city, but it doesn't look like a city. So, do you like the place?
Yes, it's beautiful. It's very nice and very green and fresh because
Good.
this week has been very, very hot.
Yeah,
And
tell me about that.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when just first steps start teaching, how did you start teaching, and why did you decide to take up teaching?
It's a funny story because actually I always wanted to be a teacher since I was a little girl. I remember coming back from school and teaching my dolls what I had learned at school. So I always wanted to be a teacher. But I never thought about teaching languages, not as foreigner languages. I actually wanted to teach Portuguese, and I'm graduated in Portuguese, and I wanted to be a literature teacher. But the thing is, English teaching chose me. When I started studying formally English when I was in university. And the school I was studying, the coordinator knew I was a teacher because I was already a teacher, a Portuguese teacher. And she invited me to teach in her school. So it just happened. And I think this is a common story among English teachers. We just end up teaching English.
Just love from the first sight,
Well, it took
or
me
from the first lesson, let's say.
yeah, it took me a while to get proper training as an English teacher. So my first lessons were terrible. I remember, I think my very first lesson was like real beginners, and I only spoke English. They looked terrified. But then I started developing professionally, and then it became more natural. And I cannot think about doing anything else now. Even, I mean, I can imagine myself teaching other things, but nothing besides teaching. Nothing. It's really a passion. Has always been. Has always been.
I see.
Yeah.
How did you end up in Germany?
I think it's the same story as teaching. teaching English chose me, and I think Germany chose me. Actually, I always wanted to teach abroad because before moving to Germany, I lived for a while in Dublin, but I was living in Dublin to study. So when I came back to Brazil, after living in Dublin, I realized that I wanted some international experience in teaching, especially because most of my experience was teaching Brazilians to speak English, and I really wanted to experience what it is like to teach other backgrounds with other first languages, with other cultural background. So my partner and I decided to start looking for a place, and he got a job here in Germany. We Before I moved to Munich, I had been to Berlin as a tourist, but my first time in Munich was with my suitcase and all my life in 5 suitcases, and moved here. But we always thought about Germany because it's quite central, first of all, in Europe, so traveling around is very easy. And also, I think I was a little bit hopeful that I would learn a new language. And I wanted the experience of learning a new language from scratch. I just didn't think it was going to be that difficult. But I think Germany chose us. This is how I can put it. It's just got a good job offer, and we just decided to take it.
So it was the job was in teaching, or it was a different
No,
thing?
no, he works with.
No, no, I'm talking about you.
For me, yes. For me, it
Yeah.
was I moved here in February 2019, and in August I was working for Volkshochschule already. It took me like a couple of months only to
Nice.
get a job.
Okay, so you started teaching in Germany. Do you like it?
Yes, I like
And
it.
not the teaching, not Germany, teaching in Germany.
Yes, I do. I do. I do because I have different challenges that I used to have in Brazil, especially because the first language is different. Also, it's not uncommon to have different nationalities in the classroom. So people with different first languages, and this is what I wanted when I decided to leave Brazil to teach in another place. So yeah, I like it here, and I like the quality of life in Germany as well. So absolutely no complaints about life in Germany. Really,
Mhm.
as a teacher and as a citizen, I like my life here. Definitely.
Anything you don't like about teaching in Germany or teaching English in Germany?
Not in
Not nothing is perfect, of course. So,
Yeah, not in Germany, but I think this is a problem worldwide. It's the wages. Definitely, you cannot survive only with your salary as a teacher. You need, for one school, you need to teach at several schools, and you're always a freelancer here. And I think these are the issues, but it's not an issue with Germany itself. It's You find that anywhere in the world. So it's not a problem with teaching in Germany. What I find interesting is how committed the students are here. And maybe those who are listening now say, they are not that committed. But for example, they tell you when they're not coming to lesson. They tell you when they haven't done their homework. This doesn't happen in Brazil. I mean, the student would not tell you if they are not coming to class. They simply do not show. That's it.
I see. Okay, the fact you have lived in several countries, you also taught in Ireland, right?
Unfortunately, not. No,
No.
I just studied there.
Have you ever taught in any other place outside Germany?
I have trained some teachers outside Brazil and outside Germany. Although it was online experience, I have delivered some workshops and conferences in Mexico, for example. But teaching English per se, I have never taught. Only in Brazil and Germany.
Okay.
Yeah.
About workshops, we'll get to the workshops.
Okay,
But
sure.
about the teaching, you mentioned some commitment.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't talk about the students, let's talk about the system, the education system. Not the education system. It's a wide topic. Teaching English.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to compare between teaching the way teachers teaching English in Brazil and in Germany, are there some differences? Are they the same?
In,
How?
in terms of teaching, I think it's quite standardized. The teachers that I have seen teaching in Brazil and the teachers that I have seen teaching here in Germany, they're well trained, most of them that I have seen at least, and they follow the same approaches into teaching. What I feel like is that the Brazilian teachers community, Brazilian teaching community, the teachers of English, they are a little bit more committed to professional development than the scenario that I found here in Germany. Not in Volkshochschule. Teachers in Volkshochschule are very committed to self-developing, professional developing. But the teachers that I have met outside from other schools, I really feel that they are not, that's just a job. I'm just earning some money. There's not as much commitment as I saw in teachers in Brazil to professional development, continuous professional development. Again, I'm not talking about teachers that I met in Volkshochschule or at Melta, because Melta is an association to self-development and professional development. But I do feel that there is a slight difference in wanting to develop as a teacher. Yeah, that's how I feel.
We'll get to Malta. Yeah, a lot of people complain about too many tests in Germany. Now, of course, I'm not talking about other subjects at university or stuff like that, but it's just a follow-up question that I remembered. Do you think, as a teacher, do you think tests really show the real progress or the level of the student? I'm not talking about the placement tests. I'm talking about the final tests. A lot of people would complain that, yeah, we had some issues, we had some problems, especially adults. And surely there are no tests like after that, but I'm talking in general.
Yes.
Do you think the test really shows the progress and the level of the student?
It depends on how the test is designed. There are several discussions about assessment. And I think the traditional way of testing, if you think about gap fill, multiple choice, my answer would be no. It doesn't actually test and show the students' skills. Why so? Because it's kind of punitive test. It punishes the students for if they don't know that structure, for example. If you're testing, for example, of simple past and present perfect gap fill, and the student doesn't know that, you're punishing that student for not knowing that point. But that student might know other things. They're not being tested. So I think it depends on how the tests and the exams are designed. When I have the opportunity to design my own exams and tests, I work for a Hochschule, and I have the opportunity. I like to give students choices. So during the test, they have choices to make. For example, there is a group that I teach that we work a lot with word formation. So what I do, I give in the exam itself, I give them 20 words, and I ask them to choose 5 and transform these words with prefix and suffixes, for example. I think this shows much more what students can do instead of punishing them for what they cannot do. So bottom line is, my answer would be no. Traditional tests, I don't think they show the level of proficiency of students, but it can be changed. Not that I'm against assessing or against testing. The thing is that we need to find ways to give opportunities to our students to show what they can do and then assess that in terms of linguistic level. Even if we take the framework into account, A1, A2, B1, B2, it always describes what students can do. It's a can-do table, a can-do description. So if we follow this in terms of assessment and testing, instead of just seeing if the students know these or that part of the matter that we taught them, then I don't think it shows as much as they can do. That's my opinion.
Okay. Since you spoke about, let's say, making things easier for the students, if I ask you the same questions but about the teachers, if you are in charge, let's imagine one day we wake up and you are the Minister of Education in the whole of Germany or Brazil. What would you do to improve teachers' conditions? You know that most teachers uh, outside universities and schools, most teachers, if not all of them, work as freelancers.
Yes.
If you're in charge, would you do something to improve the conditions? Maybe to give them some kind of more stability, more, let's say, uh, um, at least more support to continue. What would you do?
Well, I think wages is always the first thing I think of, but I think you mentioned something important, which is stability. Freelancers, we never know how much we're going to earn if, for example, in a semester, because there might be too many holidays. You might get sick. So, and also,
Health insurance and taxes may take everything you get,
exactly. And there's that was my
and the
second
tax
part.
consultants as well.
Exactly. So you need a
Mm.
tax consultant to do your taxes. You need to pay your own health insurance. You need to pay your own pension fund. And that takes away 70% of your earning. So I think making that part a little bit easier for teachers here in Germany, I think this will help us a lot in terms of stability. So in Brazil, it is a little bit easier to be a freelancer. We have a system where you can kind of open your own micro business and you have fixed tax rates. And it's not that you create a company, it's just that you have like a company number as you identify as a company, let's say. And there is a fixed percentage of taxes for people who are working under these conditions. And then if you have a surplus, then you assess your taxes after this surplus. It's much more simple, it's much easier. And with that number, you can get like the same type of insurance that a regular employer has. For example, employee has, for example, health insurance. You can pay your own pension fund as well, but as a company.
Are there any direct trains to Brazil?
Trains?
Yeah,
No,
on the.
no. That would be too difficult. I guess it's too
I
far.
would go
It's too
tomorrow.
far.
Okay,
Good
okay,
luck.
okay, okay. Now we have some questions from from some viewers. And the first question, which is asked to everyone who is not a native speaker of English, when and how did you learn English?
I think I mentioned my passion for music, right? And I think that's how it started.
Yeah, but you man, you said you didn't like Rammstein, so that's why I ignored the rest. Yeah.
I used to like Rammstein. I
Okay.
used to,
Okay.
unfortunately. The thing is, I remember, for example, me very young, just getting lyrics from songs that I like and translating them to Portuguese. So much of some basic structures and vocabulary I got from very young age, like 8 or 9 years old, translating lyrics of songs. And then before he married my mom, my dad studied in California. So he spoke fluently English. And he always encouraged us to watch movies without subtitles and listen to songs. And he always encouraged us to learn, read in English. And I think that helped me acquire basic skill in English. And then after that, I started studying when I was in university in regular courses. But I think I've been in touch with English since I was 5 years old, and always through music. Music helps me a lot learning languages. I learned English. I started learning English with songs. My Italian, although I said I grew up in an Italian family, but when I studied Italian properly, I used songs as well, and even German with Rammstein. I started studying as well with some lyrics for Rammstein. So music helps me a lot. Always helps me a lot to learn a language, and that's how I started. Of course, when I was in university, I wanted to fine hone my English skills, so I went to a regular school and started learning properly. But I started at B1 level already, and before that, I had never studied English. So that's I think up to B1 level is just basically music, movies, and books. I'm also crazy about literature. So reading a book in English has always been a goal of mine. So I wanted to reach a C1, C2 level, not only for my teaching, but also for reading like original works in literature. So that's how I started. And then when you start teaching, you have to study as well. So, and then I lived in Ireland, and then I took the CAE, the CPE exams, certificates, and then on and on with Cambridge certificates in language.
And you know that no matter how perfect our English is, we do make mistakes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work on them? Do you try to like fix them? Do you try to improve it, improve your English or improve the mistakes?
Yeah, all the time, all
How?
the time. I think as a teacher, we cannot stop studying, not only how to teach, but language is not just because I'm not a native speaker. I think every teacher should have good command of the subject that we teach. Um, I I keep doing the same thing that I have always done. I listen to music. I pay attention to lyrics. I read. I love literature, and you learn a lot from reading. I think the only thing I do not learn from reading is pronunciation, and still depending on the author you're reading, as they use dialects or a very oral language, they write as the character speaks. So even pronunciation you might learn. So I'm that kind of person that is just chilling, Netflixing at home, and wait, stop. What did she say? What word did she use? Let me check that in the dictionary. Then I make notes. So I'm always exposed to English, and I'm always paying attention to this exposure. I think this is a way to, because I think when you get, for example, proficiency certificate, for example, when I got the CPE, the Cambridge proficiency, there's not much more you can study. There are no courses for above C2 level. So you need to find your own way. And also, I think at C2 level, we have strategies to learn a language. So you just pretty much apply those strategies and try to improve, but never stop learning. Never, never.
So you lived in Italian family,
Yes.
but you are from Brazil.
Yes.
So your mother tongue, is it Italian or Portuguese?
No, it's Portuguese. My mother tongue is Portuguese.
Portuguese.
Yes.
As a native speaker of Portuguese, what difficulties may a Portuguese speaker have when learning English?
How much time do we have?
We have.
Because I can go on forever to talk about
Today
that.
is Friday, so we have till Monday morning.
Okay, good. So I think it's a good time. There are some structures that we don't have in Portuguese. For example, the present perfect. We don't have it. We do have it, but for very specific uses. So using the difference between present perfect and simple past is very difficult. Or even thinking of a compound verb tense with another auxiliary, that's difficult for Brazilians. The good thing is that we are a Latin language, and most of like high English words come from Latin. So it's very easy for a Brazilian student to say, I'm timid, instead of I'm shy, because the timid comes from Latin and we have the same word in Portuguese. So there are advantages and disadvantages. But I think the most interesting fact for Brazilian students' pronunciation, first we have nasal sounds. So if we have N or M after a vowel sound, we don't pronounce it. So for example, we pronounce it as a nasal sound. For example, a Brazilian student wouldn't say I am. We would say I am, because it's a nasal sound. And we also don't have voiceless consonants. So words like face, we put an I at the end. We say facey. And it's kind of cute because it's like facey, bookie. This is how Brazilians speak English.
Buy what you or order what you eat.
Exactly. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Teaching pronunciation for Brazilians has taught me a lot about English. I think that's the point I wanted to make, because you need actually to understand these differences. I had to teach them how to say, instead of saying, I don't know, school, because Brazilian will say e-school, not school. So you need actually to show how it's done and how it's. So it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge to make them more understandable to other speakers of English.
Okay. I have another question
Hmm.
from someone. Have you ever experienced any kind of discrimination?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, looking for a job teaching English. What,
Yes.
if it's okay, can you tell us
Yes. In
about that?
Europe, always. In Latin America, never. The first time I experienced that when I was working for a big school that had a school in Brazil. It's a big, well-known school all over the world, and we had one of them in Brazil, and I was working for them, and there was an internal process, recruitment process to hire teachers for a summer camp in Ireland, and I applied, and I did interviews. I sent my CV, and I did one, two, three interviews, and I was accepted. And the interview went okay. But when I was accepted, the person asked me if I would be okay with lying to my students and not saying that I'm Brazilian, and saying that I'm Brazilian, but I grew up in the US, or I'm Brazilian, but I grew up in an English speaking country. I think that was the first discrimination that I faced as a not European English teacher. Another one was when I came to Germany, my CV. Many schools that I sent my CV to, and although I already had the Delta when I came to Germany, module one only, but I already had the Delta, and module three was on the way. I was taking it. Very few schools looked at my CV just because they wouldn't pass my name, because my name is not English sound. It doesn't sound English. That's the issue.
I know how it feels. I know how it feels because I've also had the same situation,
I
and
can
they are
imagine.
always come creative when creating reasons.
Yeah.
So they can't say after seeing your experience or how many certificates they cannot say uh, we can't take you. They try to be creative and say um, we want someone who has the culture,
Uh
who has
huh.
experienced the culture.
What does
Yeah,
that mean?
excuse me, I'm not going to marry you. Okay, it's
Exactly.
not about culture.
And culture you can learn, right?
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. I'm here to work. I know how it feels.
And there is another thing about this native speakerism, that really makes me angry, is about the idea of the perceived native speaker. Because when a school says that they are hiring native speakers, they are talking about speakers that look a certain way. They don't think about an Indian native speaker, for example, or they don't think about a South African English speaker. They think about a certain body type, a certain skin color, and this really makes me angry, especially because, as you said, the excuses that are made. So, what is a native speaker in this kind? We need native speakers, native looking as well, not only native sounding. And this really, really pisses me off. Sorry for the language,
No, no, it's
but it
okay.
makes me
It's okay.
really, really
It's okay.
angry.
I always say that a native speaker can teach you how a word sounds or how a letter sounds, but it doesn't mean he can teach you how to produce the sound.
I wouldn't even say that a native speaker can or cannot do anything, or a non-native speaker can or cannot do anything, because it's not related to where the person comes from. It's how the person is trained. And I confess, I'm a native speaker, teacher of Portuguese. And I confess it's much more difficult for me to see my own language as a foreigner language than to see English as a foreigner language, because I myself went through a lot of troubles learning English. I know where it's difficult and where it's not. Whereas as in Portuguese, much as I have studied Portuguese at the university level, I know a lot. I can just wax grammar about Portuguese with anyone, but that doesn't mean that I can teach as well as I teach English. I think I teach Portuguese well, but I teach English much, much better than I teach Portuguese, because I have the awareness of the problems that certain topics and structures might pose to students. And as a Portuguese speaker, I don't have this.
Back to the discrimination thing. As Malta organization, do you think we can do something to at least draw the attention to this matter, or let's say raise the voice or something? If you say yes, can you give us some example?
There are many organizations that do some things for this to fight against this native speakerism. I think, for example, having model letters to be sent to schools that require native speakers as a teacher, like explaining why this is not ethical to demand, and it's not even, it doesn't make any sense as thinking about pedagogically, it doesn't make any sense to require a person to be a native speaker. That is something that can be done. Discussing this, I think having this discussion as an organization, as a teaching organization, is very, very important, helps a lot. And not only with teachers, I think with school owners and conferences, this is a discussion that has to be made, because it takes away opportunities of good professionals working in good schools. It takes away the opportunity from students and from teachers and from the organization. So I think discussing is one thing, and giving tools for teachers to defend themselves when this comes up. These are things that also can help a lot and advance a little bit more the discussion, and maybe one day end this. But I'm not that optimistic. But it can help. It can help.
Maybe after 200 years.
If
Right.
so.
Okay.
If so.
The last question
Yes.
about the workshops. What was last time when I contacted you about the podcast, you told me that you're waiting for a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about?
It was for students. It was not for teachers. It was a workshop for those students, those candidates that were taking, I think it was the CAE and FCE exams. So we wanted to give a workshop on strategies to tackle the exam. So this was the workshop that I was. We were waiting for enrollments, but unfortunately, only one student enrolled. Hope they were all prepared for the exams, so nobody showed up, unfortunately. But this was for students.
Any upcoming workshops? Or?
So far, no. I think the winter semester is starting to be planned at Volkshochschule. So probably they are going to contact me with some ideas of workshops. And then what normally happens is they tell you what topics are interesting for our teachers, and we can choose what topics we want to give a workshop in about. So far there's nothing planned, but I think in the next couple of months something probably will show up. Probably.
I hope.
Yeah, me too. I like it. It's a good way to keep in touch with teachers, because I feel that the teacher's life is a little bit lonely, because we don't have like a teacher's room when everybody meet before the lessons start, because the lessons are always in different times and places. So it's not that we can always exchange ideas. So these things that Malta does and the workshop that Volkshochschule also offers are so important for us to exchange experiences, exchange thoughts, difficulties, rants, maybe to rant together about something or someone or something like this. So I think it's very important, this type of building community that Malta does, and workshops at Volkshochschule as well.
I do recall the first time we met was in Malta. So the workshop in Rosenheimer. No.
Wasn't it
Gasteig, Gasteig.
It was in Gasteig,
Gasteig.
yeah. And I think I was
Rosenheimer
covering up.
The stop. Yeah.
I think I was covering up for a teacher who
Yeah,
was
exactly.
sick.
Exactly.
I don't remember
yeah.
what the topic was. I don't remember, but I remember you and Tatiana as well.
Yeah, it was
I remember
the very
you
first
two.
time in Malta.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
you two in that workshop.
And here we
yes.
are.
Here we are.
Here we
That's
are.
good.
Okay. Any
This
last
beautiful
words?
day.
Yeah. Any last words? First, say goodbye.
Well, never stop learning. I think that's the motto for teachers, right? Never stop learning. I think even if This is something that has taught me a lot about teaching, starting something from scratch. So always try to start something from scratch. It doesn't have to be a language. I remember when I was finished with all the teacher training certificates and language certificates, and no, I need to learn something that I don't know anything about. So I started learning how to sing. And it was like eye opening, just like, well, that's how a student feels when you really don't know what to do. And the same thing with German. Being an A1 real beginner in a language classroom is like, oof. So this is how it feels. Okay. So we don't lose empathy for our students. I think learning something from scratch every now and then, language or anything else, really puts us in our students' minds and positions and say like, ooh, they have a tough job.
And that's how I started to learn from scratch: is recording, editing.
Okay, and you're
I
doing a good job as well.
I tried with singing, but
It's
I
tough.
sing when I shave. My wife always says, "Hey, close the door, or please stop, don't
Stop
do it,
singing.
stop singing." So I realized it wasn't my cup of tea, or
Yeah.
it wasn't her cup of tea. That
Or maybe you
I
can
think.
try to find a teacher who allows you to shave during the
No, no, no.
lesson.
Now I sing when I'm taking a shower.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, that's
I
good.
never give up.
The acoustic is better. Your voice, your
No
your
one
throat
hears.
is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Ella. Thank
thank
you
you
for
for
coming,
having me.
for
Thank
being
you.
here. Okay. Thank you very much for being with us. The podcast is going to be two versions: the video version and the audio version for those who are commuting. So it's going to be on the Belta podcast channel and on my channel, Teachers Lounge. Thank you very much, and see you later with another guest.